Today we want to consider the question, how do human muscle cells get the energy required for them to function? So you picture a person maybe holding some weights. Maybe you can try this even if you'd like. Grab a book or two, some heavy book like a dictionary or encyclopedia, and just try to hold it straight out for as long as you possibly can. And that's getting to this question. How do human muscle cells get the chemical energy required for them to function? So for you to hold that book out, you've got muscles that are contracting. They need energy to get that to happen, to allow you to be able to do that function. Now metabolism just refers to all the chemical reactions, all of them. All right. So when you talk about someone, you're like, my brother has a high metabolism. He can eat 5 large pizzas, and he only weighs 105 pounds. Well, metabolism has to do with all the chemical reactions. Chemical reactions require energy, which is why he can eat all those calories, and he doesn't seem to store any. He seems to just burn them up to use them for different body processes. But metabolism is all the chemical reactions. Catabolic reactions break things down. So you can think of it like catastrophe. It was a catastrophe. Everything fell apart, broke down. Well, catabolic reactions are where the body is taking some big molecule, breaking it down. Anabolic reactions are where you're taking materials and putting them together to build something bigger. So when we talk about anabolic steroids, they're chemicals that are going to try to make your body build things bigger, in that case your muscles. So metabolism, all the chemical reactions. Anabolism, the ones that are building up. Catabolism, the ones that are breaking down. We can organize metabolism into some metabolic pathways because some of those reactions, in order to happen, are going to require oxygen, especially to get energy to your muscles. But there's another pathway when the oxygen runs out that your body can take that pathway. So there's more than one path, the with the oxygen path and then the without the oxygen path. The one with the oxygen, we're going to call that aerobic. The one without the oxygen, we're going to call it without oxygen, anaerobic. So let's take a look then at some of these chemical reactions and how they work. But notice this other final key point here, and that is that specific enzymes help speed up reactions. Enzymes are proteins, and you'll remember that they themselves aren't used up, but they help speed up reactions. So I think of it kind of like a copier machine. I remember where I used to work, I had these 2 copier machines. One was for between 1 and 50 copies, and we would put the paper on there, close the lid, type in 25, hit start, and it would go like this. And then out would come 1 copy. And then out would come another copy. And it seemed like it took forever to make all these copies. But then we also had this other copy machine for 50 to 100 copies. And we put the paper down there, close the lid, and it would go. And the copy would like shoot out of the other side in the air. They would like come out of the copier like airborne and then fall into this tray. It was amazing. Both copied. One just copied very slowly. The other copied very quickly. Similarly, in your body, the one machine copied very quickly. We had another machine that copied very slowly. They were both copy machines. They both got the job done, but one just got the job done much faster. That's like a chemical reaction with the help of an enzyme. Enzymes just speed up chemical reactions. They help the chemical reactions happen faster, more easily, more effectively. So cells can use cellular respiration and fermentation to get ATP. Catabolic means we're going to break things down. In this case, we're going to break down sugar. As we break down this complex sugar molecule, we'll call it glucose. This complex glucose molecule, which is made up of which makes up a bigger molecule called glycogen. So this big molecule, glycogen, will break it down to glucose. We'll break that glucose apart. We're going to take that complex molecule, break it down. That's catabolic. We're going to break it down. as we break that molecule down, energy is going to be released. So let's take a look at how energy gets released. So here's our muscle contracting. Every time it contracts, it loses a little bit of its energy currency. And that energy currency molecule we'll call ATP, adenosine triphosphate, ATP. So your muscle has ATP. Every time it contracts, it loses some of that ATP. And that ATP is the energy currency of the cell. It's kind of like the $1 bill of the cell. That's what it uses to spend to do things. So you can save up some ATP, but every time your muscle contracts, you're going to use up some of that ATP to get it done. The question is, how do we get more of that energy molecule? How do we get more of that ATP? So let's get an overview of where we can get some ATP. We can get it from this process called hydrolysis of creatine phosphate. Now, we don't know what that is yet, but we do know that it's one way that we can get some more ATP. We can also get it from glycolysis. Glyco just refers to the sugar molecules, glycogen. Lysis means to split. So we're going to split a big glycogen molecule, and that's going to give us some energy in the form of ATP. Then we also have this other way to get some ATP. It's called the Krebs cycle and oxidative phosphorylation. It's this other big process we'll try to investigate more closely. But all we know is that these processes happen in the mitochondria, and the end result is some ATP. So let's look at some of these more closely. All right, so here we go again. Glycolysis gets us 2 ATP. When we break down glycogen to glucose, we split the glucose, glucose, lysis to split. That gives us some ATP. Hydrolysis of creatine phosphate, we'll find out this gives us 1 for 1. And then we can use this pathway. If there's no oxygen present, we can use this pathway to get some ATP too. We'll call it anaerobic. If we do have oxygen, we can use this pathway, and we can get a lot of ATP. So let's take a look at the creatine phosphate part. How do we get ATP from creatine phosphate? So here's my buddy Joe Schmo. He's warming up, and as he warms up, his muscles are contracting. They're losing ATP. We need to replace it. So we can replace that used up ATP by adding one of the phosphates from creatine. So what happens? When we take an ATP molecule, it has 1 adenosine, 3 phosphates, a triphosphate. So adenosine, 3 phosphates. So when we split those 3 phosphates, we'll just knock the last one off of it, go from ATP to adenosine diphosphate, ADP. We've broken that chemical bond, that's released some energy. But we can replace that phosphate, we can recharge that battery, we can give that energy back by taking the phosphate from a creatine phosphate and adding it to our old ADP. So what's that again? Here's the creatine stored in your muscle cells. Here's our used up energy. We're recharging it 1 for 1. So why is it that people go out to a supplement store and buy creatine phosphate? What's the idea behind it? Well, the idea is if they can fill their muscles with creatine, then whenever their body needs to recharge that ATP battery, there'll be lots of creatine there to allow your muscles to get more energy to do more work. In that case, often lift heavier weights or lift weight for longer. So here's what I was trying to describe. 1 adenosine, 3 phosphates. To get the energy, we're going to split that last phosphate out. When we split it off, that gives us some energy, but it gives us this other molecule, ADP, adenosine diphosphate, 2 phosphates. We can recharge that battery with the help of creatine phosphate. We'll take the phosphate from the creatine, add it to the ADP, and that will give us our energy molecule back. Where can I get sugar then? So that's the creatine phosphate way that I can get ATP. Now the glycolysis one, the one from splitting sugar. But where can I get sugar from? Well, typically, you store lots of glycogen in your liver. You also store some in your muscle cells. Then there's some glycogen or glucose floating around your bloodstream. You might have heard people talk about their blood sugar, like my blood sugar level is low. Well, that's just glucose floating around their bloodstream. Glycogen typically stored in your liver, gets broken down to glucose and distributed by the bloodstream. But you store some glycogen in your liver, some in your muscle cells. So if you are trying to lose weight, then when you get on the treadmill, you start running, your body's going to release energy in the form of glycogen from your liver. And it takes about 30 minutes or more to get rid of most of the glycogen in your liver. Then your body has to look for some other place that it stores energy, and those are fat cells. So after running for about 30 minutes, then your body starts to burn up some of its fat cells for energy. So let's take a look at how glycolysis works. We're going to split the glucose molecule. So here's our glucose that we've been storing in our muscles, traveling in our bloodstream. We split it. When we do, we get some ATP energy. In fact, 2 ATP molecules from splitting that glucose. But we also get some other molecule. It's called pyruvate. And if I can use that pyruvic acid, if I can use those pyruvic acid molecules, I can get some more energy from them. So just by splitting the glucose, though, that gives me 2 ATPs. But if I can somehow use that pyruvic acid, I can get more. So when we talk about cellular respiration, we're looking at these 4 basic steps. So cellular respiration, it requires oxygen. That's why when you're running on the treadmill, you start breathing faster because you're trying to get more oxygen to your muscles. The steps in cellular respiration include glycolysis, splitting the glucose that gives us some energy. A transition reaction where we're going to take that pyruvic acid and manipulate that molecule some to give us some more energy. We're going to take the product of the transition reaction, we run it through something called the Krebs cycle, also sometimes referred to as the citric acid cycle. That'll give us some more energy. Take the product from that, run it through the electron transport chain, and that's going to give us lots of energy. But these occur continuously in the cells because cells require energy. So when you're like, I need to eat 2,500 calories a day, what that means is that's the amount of energy you need to consume in the form of chemical bonds found in food so your body can break those chemical bonds and use it for all kinds of functions within the cell. Because those functions are happening whether you're awake or whether you're asleep, they are continuous. So here it is again. Here's our glucose molecule, that's our form of energy. We split it. That gives us some ATP, 2 in fact, and this other molecule called pyruvic acid. We're going to take that pyruvate, the transition reaction will manipulate it some, we'll run the results into the citric acid cycle that gives us 2 ATP. The results from that we can run through the electron transport chain, and that gives us 32 ATP, a lot, a big payout there, for a total of 36 ATP for every 1 glucose that we split. So for every 1 glucose molecule, we can get lots of energy from that if there's oxygen present. So let's look at phase 1, glycolysis. We're just going to split the glucose into 2 parts. We're taking 1 big glucose molecule, we just break it into 2. When we do, that gives us some energy, 2 ATP, and something else called pyruvate, or some pyruvate molecule. We can do something with that. All right, so here's our glucose molecule. We split it in half. By doing that, we get a little bit of ATP. Now, it costs us some to do it, but we get some out of it. In the transition reaction that happens inside the mitochondria of the cell, so this is an organelle in the cell that you've been looking at, that's the energy producer, sometimes called the powerhouse of the cell. If there's oxygen present, we're going to take that pyruvic acid and make something else. In this case, we're going to make another molecule, acetyl-CoA. Those 2 molecules, it doesn't really matter, like it's just the name happens to be pyruvic acid, acetyl-CoA, and we can take, our body takes that acetyl-CoA and can use it So the transition reaction is just taking molecules, making them something useful. So we're taking a pyruvate, we'll turn it into acetyl-CoA through some chemical reactions. By doing that, we're going to get a usable molecule. So if oxygen is available, then we can carry on this reaction. All right, so our oxygen is available. Here's our pyruvate, that's the green triangles. This is our transition reaction because oxygen is present. We're going to convert that acetyl-CoA, or we're going to convert that pyruvate into acetyl-CoA, and we can use that acetyl-CoA. What do we use it for? Well, let's find out. So our acetyl-CoA is going to enter the citric acid cycle. So that's what the citric acid cycle needs, the Krebs cycle. That's what it needs. When we do that conversion and we run through the citric acid cycle, we get a little bit of energy, 2 ATP. It does require some oxygen for that to happen, and the product of those chemical reactions is carbon dioxide. So when you breathe out, you're breathing out carbon dioxide. The reason is because your muscles are generating carbon dioxide right here as a result of the citric acid cycle. All right? Now, it does cost a little bit to run this citric acid cycle. It takes some energy to get that cycle to turn, but then you get some energy out. I think of it kind of like a change machine at an arcade. You put $1 into the change machine one night, and instead of getting 4 quarters out, you get 8. What do? Well, if you're honest, you tell the manager, right? If you're not so honest, you take those quarters, you put them in your pocket, and you walk away. If you're really devious, you get another $1 out, and you put another $1 into the machine. And let's say that you take another $1 out, you put another $1 into the machine, and again, you get 8 quarters. Now the wheels are turning. And you're thinking, put $1 in, I got $2 out. Put another $1 in, I got $2 out. I'm going to keep putting money into this machine because I'm getting more out than I'm putting in. Similarly, here, it costs a little bit of energy to run the citric acid cycle, but you're getting more out. The benefits of it are much greater. So here, we're going to go through the transition reaction to get acetyl-CoA. We run through the citric acid cycle. It costs us some energy to do that, but we do get some energy out. More importantly, we get the products that we need to put into our really good machine, the electron transport chain. So let's say that you put $2 into this machine, and you get $36 out. Every time you put 2 in, you get 36 out. Same thing here. We're going to put 2 ATP in to run it, to help keep it running, but we're getting 36 out. So because it costs us some, our net result, 32 ATP. Now, to do the electron transport chain reactions, it does require oxygen, and it does release some water. So remember, the citric acid cycle, one of the results was carbon dioxide. As that carbon dioxide builds up, we breathe it out. But when we breathe, we also breathe out water. So when you break down sugar, water is one of the results, one of the products. So every time you breathe out, you're getting rid of some of the water that has been broken down by sugar in your body, from the sugar in your body. So here's our electron transport chain happening in the mitochondria. It does cost us some, but as we run it down this chain, the result, lots of ATP, so long as oxygen is present. So glucose gives us 2. The transition reaction to make some molecules that we need. The citric acid cycle costs us a little bit, but gives us 2. The electron transport chain costs us a little bit, gives us 32. The final product, 36 total. So we can get ATP from creatine phosphate 1 for 1. We can get it by splitting a glucose molecule. Every 1 glucose molecule, we split it, we get 2 ATP. And we get something that we can use, this pyruvic acid. We convert that pyruvic acid to acetyl-CoA. We run it through the Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain. The products are carbon dioxide and water. The result, lots of ATP. But what if we don't have oxygen? So here you are standing holding those books for a while, and after a while you get this burning feeling in your shoulders. What's this burning feeling, and why is it that it gets really hard to continue to hold those books up? After a while, just get so tired. What then? Why is that? The reason that you get tired is because you can't get oxygen to those muscle cells fast enough. And at first they have plenty of oxygen, so they're using the aerobic pathway, and they're making 36 ATP. But once the oxygen supply gets reduced, your cells start to use the anaerobic pathway, and instead of making 36 ATP, they make a lot less, only 2. You need that ATP, you need that energy to keep those cells contracted. So when you break down glucose without oxygen, it's not very efficient at all, not in comparison. So here's our glycolysis, but this time we don't have oxygen present. So that pyruvic acid is converted into lactic acid. The lactic acid starts to build up in your muscles and in your bloodstream, and it burns because acid burns. So as that lactic acid builds up in your muscles and in your bloodstream, you feel a burning sensation. So you might know some people at the gym who are like, it burns, and they're really tired. And kind of like my buddy here, Joe, he's really tired because the lactic acid is building up. Why? There's no oxygen present. So instead of that pyruvic acid being converted into acetyl-CoA, it's converted into lactic acid. That does give us some energy, but it also causes our muscles to feel that burning sensation. The problem is it only gives us 2 ATP. So long as you have lots of energy, you can really contract those muscles, contract those muscles, contract those muscles. But as soon as you can't get enough oxygen to those muscles, the energy that you're able to produce goes way down, and so your muscles feel really tired, and then you can't hold up the weight, and it burns after a while. So glycolysis gives you 2, and then taking pyruvate to get to the lactic acid, again, not producing much ATP, only 2. A very inefficient way to get energy. So where are we getting most of our energy? So are we getting it from creatine phosphate? Well, for every 1 creatine molecule, we get 1 ATP. So it's not bad. Glycolysis, for every 1 sugar molecule, we're getting 2 ATPs. But if we can have oxygen present, we can really generate a lot of ATP by using the Krebs cycle and oxidative phosphorylation. Look at that. 36 ATP. Lots of energy so that your body cells can do the things that they're required to do.